It's the beginning of October, and that can only mean one thing in our nation's capital. The Supreme Court is back in session. As always, the Supreme Court's 9 justices will be facing a broad array of issues during their upcoming term, with cases tackling everything from federalism to dogfighting videos. But one question in particular is sure to capture the nation's attention. How far can government go in restricting the right of Americans to own a handgun for self-defense? The case in question is McDonald v. City of Chicago, a challenge to the Windy City's attempts to get guns off the streets. In the 1980s, Chicago made it illegal to own a handgun unless it was registered with the city. Then the city made it illegal to register a handgun at all. In essence, America's third largest city nullified the Second Amendment to the Constitution. You might be asking yourself how that is possible. After all, didn't the United States spend most of the 1800s arguing over whether states and localities could ignore the Constitution when they disagreed with it? And didn't the Civil War essentially answer that question once and for all? Unfortunately, not. In the years after the Civil War, federal courts began a process called incorporation. This meant that the essential rights in the Constitution would apply just as equally to state and local governments as they did to the federal government. In other words, if Congress couldn't limit free speech, then neither could Vermont. And if the president couldn't establish a national religion, Oklahoma couldn't establish a state one. But incorporation has been a piecemeal process, and one of the few sections of the Bill of Rights that hasn't been incorporated yet is the Second Amendment. While the Supreme Court ruled in last year's District of Columbia v. Heller case that the Second Amendment does indeed protect an individual right to gun ownership, that decision's impact was limited to Washington, D.C., so citizens throughout the rest of the nation still find their right to defend themselves limited by the whims of state legislatures and city councils. As the High Court prepares to take on this important case, the justices should carefully consider both the principled and practical reasons for making Second Amendment protections extend to the states. When it comes to principles, no document lays out the American creed better than the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration's promise to rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is beautiful, but it doesn't mean much when citizens are deprived of the ability to protect those rights from being infringed upon. Taking away citizens' rights to own handguns does just that. As a practical matter, the situation in Chicago tells us all we need to know about gun control laws. In the decades since the handgun restrictions have been implemented, crime has increased dramatically in Chicago. It's now one of the most violent cities in the nation, and decent citizens walk the streets in fear. Of those citizens is Otis McDonald, the 76-year-old man who filed the case now before the Supreme Court. Why does Otis want the right to carry a handgun? Because the criminals in his neighborhood know that he calls the police when he witnesses something illegal, and they have marked him for revenge. What kind of system needlessly leaves a man like Otis in fear for his life? Not the one the founders designed. And hopefully, by the end of the Supreme Court's current term, not Chicago's. That's this week's Freedom Minute.